Consumed. Westlake Trilogy Book 1 by J.C. Jarrett. Chapter 8. Nub Nub the Invincible. Peyton and his strange companion rode along in silence as the sun crested over the forest, stealing away the darkness. Riding over a small hill, the warrior saw the ruin roll into view. His stomach tightened at the sight as his mind stormed back to that dreadful day 6 years ago. Putting his heels to the horse's flank, he picked up speed as he headed past the ruin at a good pace. The warrior looked more than once at the 2 stone markers standing about 40 foot from the ruin. He wanted to stop, but the last time he visited his father's grave, he had made a promise to extract vengeance from Grover, and as of yet, he has not fulfilled his promise. But soon he would, and then he could live a life of peace with his family. I stopped there on my ride to your home. That is your parents. I would like to know why humans treat the dead with such grief. We highborn treat our dead with joy, for they have begun a new journey. The accented voice asked of the brooding warrior. Peyton's anger flared before he could bring it under control. He turned, shouting at the highborn. What would you know of grief your people lived to be thousands of years old hiding in your tree villages? As soon as the words left his mouth, he put the spurs to his horse, forcing it to sprint a good 40 yards ahead from Yander, who showed no emotion on his long face at all. The warrior slowed his horse. Reaching up, he raised the hood of his brown cloak over his head. Peyton tried to bring his anger under control. He did not want to release the darkness he carried within him. The warrior thought back to the last time he had let himself go. After the Goblin War was over, it took the man several months to return to his old self, and from that point, he swore he would never let the darkness he called the warrior gain control again. Until this day, he had not even felt the warrior there with him, but now, on this journey, he felt the warrior's presence every second. Jander watched the human riding ahead of him and wondered what he had said to anger the man. He had heard the stories of his bravery and valor in the Goblin War, also that his skill with a blade may know very few equals in this part of the world. The highborn thought of his words, finding no flaw in his question, but he decided to give the dangerous human the space he desired right now. It's to the north from here, Lord de Crystal. The short, very thin man said, tracing a finger across a large map. Lord de Crystal leaned over the desk, looking at the map closely. Are you sure this time, Rubius? I don't want another repeat of last time. De Crystal eyes peered into the smaller man as he spoke. The small Rubius turned, retrieving a large stack of parchment from a table in the stately fashioned room, its huge window overlooking the ships docked in the harbor. Right, my lord. I have traced it all the way to this region, and after speaking with that old wizard, it must be there. The small man's pencil-thin mustache curled up in a grin as he spoke. Lord de Crystal walked across the room, stopping in front of the window. He stood for several minutes watching the dock laborers. The Lord's smooth voice filled the room. Good. Go downstairs and inform the innkeeper that Lord Alistair de Crystal will be needing 6 strong horses this evening. Finally, I will have it in my grasp. The late afternoon sun passed behind the Empress Mountains as the odd companions dismounted. Peyton signaled the highborn to follow as the warrior slipped into the forest edge. The warrior tried to hide his surprise at how Jander moved through the forest as if he had traveled this area his whole life. After nearly half an hour, Peyton stopped, dropping to a knee. The warrior had to turn to see if the highborn was still with him. He made not a sound in the soft underbrush. The site of the farm was nothing how Peyton had remembered it. Not a building stood unmarred, besides the small one-room house. The large barn was nothing more than an unrecognizable pile of timbers, grown over now by vines and weeds. Only the chimney stood, now encrusted with vines weaving their way to the top from the small forge house. The memories of that building still caused Elisa to wake at times in the night, screaming and clutching her leg. The house still stood and seemed strong, even though brush had grown clear to and upon the roof. Peyton and Jander stayed surveying from their vantage point for several minutes, never seeing a sign of life. It does not look to me as if anybody has been he in a decade or more, the accented voice whispered. I was 12 years ago. The warrior spoke, his voice distant, never taking his eyes from the ruins of the old Grover farm. Thoughts of that day flooded back again. He felt like he did the day the warrior had rode here in search of Grover. Peyton had tried for hours to pick up a trail, but never could. It was as if the fat man had vanished from Tangle altogether. Peyton felt the anger and rage building in him just like that day 6 years ago. The day he found his father dead. The warrior within craved revenge and wanted it now. Standing, Peyton strode purposely from the tree line in a straight path to the house. If Grover was here, that is the only place he could hide. Flipping his cloak back past his straight sabers, the warrior rested his hands lightly upon the hilts. Jander watched perplexed at the action the warrior had taken, expecting them to work out some form of plan before charging in. Reaching up, the highborn slipped a short bow down off his shoot, then notch an arrow from a quiver riding low on his hip. With bow ready, he followed the warrior progress through the knee-high grass on his way to the farmhouse. Peyton eyed the pitch-black opening that no longer held a door for any sign of movement. The warrior's guard began to slacken. He felt this place was as empty now as it was 6 years ago. Huge bellows of deep rolling laughter echoed across the ruins, stopping the warrior in his tracks. Eyes darted left and right in search of the source, but was unable to locate it. If you're Westlake, then I'm wasting my time. The voice boomed like thunder from the blackness of the doorway, and then was followed by another fit of laughter. When the laughter died, an eerie silence filled the area. Not a bird of woodland critter could be heard. The silence was broken by the sudden heavy thuds of footsteps inside the house. Movement could be seen inside, but nothing had prepared Peyton or the highborn for the monster that emerged. Having to duck through the doorway, the creature stood over 7 feet tall. Skin as gray as stone stretched across a heavy, muscled bare chest nearly 4 foot wide. A neck corded with thick strands of muscle ran up to a head the size of a small boulder, with a thick back slopping forehead that ended with a heavy braid of coal-black hair. Jander took off instantly in an attempt to get into a good firing range. He had recognized the monster for what it was, a half-orc. Half-orcs have the best of both races, the tough, strong body of the orc and the keen mind of a human. Very few are ever seen. Most don't make it past childhood being shunned by both humans and orc alike. The ones that do live tend to be very dangerous adversaries. You won't make a very good plaything. I doubt you last long enough, little man. The voice thundered again, showing small tusk-like teeth. Peyton saw the distant white blur of movement from the corner of his eye, knowing it to be Jander getting into position to use his bow. He just needed more time. You have me at a disadvantage. You know of me, but I don't know of you, the warrior said, hoping to buy more time, putting a little levity in his voice. You have never heard of me. I am Nub Nub the Invincible. Laughter again follows the half-orc's words. I was given the name because I like to tear little feller's arms off, leaving only nubs. The monster finished, a toothy grin filling its larger face. Peyton looked closely at the creature and decided with arms the size of tree trunks he could probably be able to do it. The warrior saw the flash of white movement again this time, ducking in behind the old farmhouse, and decided it was time to make his move. Where's Grover? The warrior's voice losing its levity. Oh, you will see soon enough, after I have my fun with you. With these words, the monster broke into a dead sprint for the warrior. 2 arrows streaked from the roof of the old house. Nub Nub's huge legs carried him quickly across the ground, but not as quickly as the wooden shafts shot through the air. The impact and complete surprise of the attack caused the monster to lose balance. Falling forward, the half-orc's face slammed into the ground as he skidded along, stopping right at Peyton's feet. Okay, let's try this again, the warrior said, crouching down by the fallen Nub Nub's head. Where is Grover? The half-orc reached down, grabbing both arrows, one in each hand. With a grunt of pain, he jerked the arrows from his flesh. Peyton stood quickly at the sight. Nub-Nub stood just as quick, the holes in his knees completely healed, leaving not even a mark on his skin. Peyton wished his head didn't hurt so badly. He may have enjoyed the feeling of flying through the air from the huge backhand of Nub-Nub, landing hard more than 10 feet away on his back. 2 more arrows thudded into the monster, sinking deeply into the small of his back. Paying no heed to the highborn, he reached back, grabbing the arrows, both in one large fist, tearing them from his body. The ragged holes quickly sealed, then were gone completely. 3 quick steps brought the huge Nub-Nub before the down warrior, bringing down a 2-foot-long boot upon his chest. Peyton would have screamed if he had the air to do so. The monstrous boot came down again as Jander leapt from his perch. Firing 3 arrows in rapid succession, one by one the arrows seemed to appear, sticking clear through the half-orc's thick, muscled neck. The monster staggered from the shots, but stayed on his feet as he reached up for the wooden shafts. Blood gurgled and bubbled from the wounds as Nub-Nub tried to breathe. Wrapping a huge hand around the arrow's points, the monster pulled them the rest of the way through his throat. Seconds later, as before, the wound was gone, leaving no sign that it was ever there. Peyton used the opportunity to stand on his feet, but trying to regain his balance. Pain throbbed at the warrior's temples. His chest felt like it had been caved in, but he was still able to draw his straight sabers. Looking down at the long but thin blades, he felt for the first time that it may not be enough for the task at hand. Nub-Nub's attention was now on the highborn as he notched another arrow in his short bow. Pulling a huge wooden-headed hammer from a strap across his back, gripping it in both hands, his eyes never leaving Jander. A whistle brought Nub-Nub's attention back to the warrior just in time to see the flash of the 2 razor-sharp sabers as they cut deeply into his belly. The warrior watched his blades X in front of him, and then both slash out, drawing an ever-widening line of crimson across the monster's stomach. The middle of the wound, laid directly over Nub-Nub's belly button, began to widen as portions of his intestines rolled from his body. Peyton watched with satisfaction as the monster released a tremendous roar of pain. Grabbing for his quickly leaving innards, he managed to catch them in one huge hand, holding them tight to his wounded abdomen. Peyton backed away from the monster, watching in fascination as the intestines snaked back into the wound as it began to heal. Just before the gash was completely gone, the warrior spotted a thin silver ring on the hand of Nub-Nub. It glowed a dim light until the wound was healed. Then the light dissipated. A smile crossed Nub-Nub's face as he raised the huge hammer. The mighty hammer swung in an arc, the warrior bringing his blades up in a block. Huge muscles flexed as the hammer powered through the warrior's defenses, its huge wooden head slamming into Peyton's side. For the second time this day, Peyton found himself in pain, flying through the air only to land hard several feet away. The wide blade of the short sword slashed repeatedly, opening several wounds on the monster. Jander watched as every hit he scored healed before the next blow was struck. Ignoring the highborn, Nub-Nub raised the giant hammer over his head. Peyton looked up to see the wooden head of the hammer coming down toward him. Panic set into the warrior's eyes. Bringing the hammer down with all his strength, the half-orc let loose a mighty scream of victory. The warrior scrambled, throwing his legs over his head. He flipped completely over, the force of his maneuver throwing him from the dirt just before the hammer impacted, sinking deeply into the ground. Twisting in midair, Peyton managed to get his feet under him, landing upright. Seeing the huge sinkhole now in front of him, Peyton looked back up at his adversary. The huge Nub-Nub stood in a fit of rage for Peyton's narrow escape from the hammer. Jander jammed his wide blade into the monster's side, bringing a scream of pain from Nub-Nub as the blade sank deep into his flesh. The wooden hammer's head flew toward Jander, who somehow got his short sword up in time to block the attack. The razor-honed edge of the wide blade sank deeply into the wooden head as it impacted the blocking weapon. His blade held fast in the hammer. Jander found himself on the ground, his hands tingling in pain. Peyton lunged in, trying to pull the half-orc away from the down highborn. Seeing Jander's hit on the invincible Nub-Nub gave the cunning warrior an idea. The warrior's blades flashed like bolts of lightning as he put them to work. Not going for a killing blow this time, Peyton tried to cause as much pain as possible by going for tender areas. Digging the blade deep into Nub-Nub's stomach, twisting the hilt of his sword with as much force as possible. Howls of pain escaped the half-orc as the warrior kept the blade buried in the monster's stomach, sending his other blade into the knees of the monster. A roar of rage poured from the half-orc as he brought his hammer down toward the warrior. Peyton easily sidestepped the attack, pivoting the deeply buried blade, tearing muscle and organ as he continued to twist the blade. The monster brought its hammer around in an arc parallel to the ground. Peyton quickly ducked the clumsy swing, bouncing back to his feet. The warrior set his blade in a downward pivot, slicing deeply into the half-orc intestine. With all his strength, Peyton launched his free blade point first, deep into the groin of the monster. Stars burst in the half-orc's vision. His hands opened uncontrollably, dropping its massive hammer to the ground. His mind no longer functioned. He thought of nothing but the pain, like a fire in his belly and groin. The pain began to diminish, and Nub-Nub's senses returned. He found himself on his knees before the warrior. Fear crept into the monster. Peyton's hands shot out, each blade an extension of his will, one slashed deeply, opening the exposed throat of Nub-Nub. Sunlight flared off the other blade, temporarily blinding the monster before it sank deeply into its right eye, the point coming to rest on the back of the thick skull. Crimson poured from the open throat, causing the monster to begin to drown in its own blood. Reaching a hand up to try to stop the tide, Peyton saw the ring with its faint glow on the monstrous hand. Twisting the hilt of his sword, the warrior began to scramble the brains of the half-orc. The hand stopped and jerked in midair as the second blade, finding its new target, slashed downward. 4 huge fingers and a bit of silver tumbled through the air on their way to the ground as the defeated Nub-Nub screamed in pain and frustration. Nub-Nub raised its hand to its one good eye, seeing all 4 fingers gone. He knew there was a reason he should feel panic right now, but he could not remember why. The monster stared blankly ahead as it pitched over, falling flat on its face. Nub-Nub lay still in an ever-expanding pool of its own blood. With the power of the ring gone, the monster could not regenerate its wounds. Peyton watched, sadness in his face. He hated having to take a life. Even in defense of his own or another, it always bothered him. Jander had made it back to his feet. He had seen the display of swordsmanship and had trouble not being a little envious of the human warrior. The highborn bent, grabbing the hilt to his short sword, began to wrench it back and forth till it was free of its wooden prison. Seeing the glint of silver on the blood-covered ground, Jander bent again, retrieving the ring. Peyton looked at the highborn. That's what kept healing him. I wish I hadn't killed him. We need information. Jander studied the ring for a few seconds, then handed it to Peyton. It's not for me, but I see no sense leaving it here. You should take it. The strange, accented highborn said. Peyton looked at the ring, not really liking the idea of it. Then the thought of his daughter with it changed his mind. She would never be hurt again. Taking the ring, he tried to find a safe place to keep it. Finally, he gave up and slid it upon his finger, its magic automatically adjusting its size to a perfect fit. What now? We have no idea where Grover may be? The warrior said, looking back at the downed half-orc. Leave that to me. Jander spoke as he studied the monster's huge boots. Peyton stepped from the one-room house, his search for clues to Grover's whereabouts coming up empty. Glancing up toward the overgrown fields, he saw the highborn waking, slowly studying the ground. Occasionally, he would take a knee and inspect the grass and dirt closely. Peyton! The highborn yelled across the farm. Peyton broke into a run, taking him to the highborn quickly. Here is where Nub-Nub entered the farm. Peyton looked at the spot and knew it well. It was the spot he had entered the farm 12 years ago. "I think I know where he is,"